ExecMBA podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, we return to one of our favorite conversation topics, careers, and welcome back a frequent podcast guest, career advisor Jim Collins. Jim and I recently sat down to talk a little bit more about the career outcomes data for our Executive MBA Class of 2019. I think you're going to enjoy this conversation. Admittedly, it's the longest podcast episode we've ever recorded, but there's a lot of great information here. So without further ado, here's my conversation with career advisor Jim Collins. Jim, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, well, good to be here, Brett. Thanks so much for inviting me again.
It's great to have you back on. This is your fourth or fifth appearance. One of the most regular guests on the ExecMBA podcast. You and Sarita setting a very high bar for your colleagues.
Well, delighted to be here. And, it's important to, I think, for the incoming students and the student prospects to answer their questions to help them make good decisions about their career direction and their post-grad education.
Absolutely. And we know that career is top of mind for anyone thinking about an MBA, Executive MBA included. I get a lot of questions from prospective students and wanted to take some time here on the podcast to talk about the recent employment outcomes report for our class of 2019. This is actually the first time we've collected this data in an organized way for Executive MBA students. Big congratulations to the CDC team on collecting all this great career information.
Oh, great. Well, thanks very much. Yeah, we felt that it was something very important to do. If you among all people are certainly very, sensitive to the fact that the incoming students, the student prospects, people looking us over are very concerned about the fact that they're making a sizable investment in time, effort, resources, and on a very real level want to know what are the outcomes, what's the return on my investment.
Absolutely. And I want to talk a little bit about, before we get into the career data, I want to talk a little bit about, the inspiration for collecting this information. I mean, obviously, this information has been collected on the full-time MBA side for a while, for a number of years. This is the first time we've collected it in this kind of robust way for Executive MBA students. Talk a little bit more about the inspiration for that. So, where did the idea come from?
Well, part of what I just mentioned, I think the idea has been around since the Executive MBA program's inception. The challenge for executive MBAs in collecting such data versus the residential MBAs is that there's such diversity among the exec MBAs. I mean, they are coming from multiple walks of life. They're at multiple stages of career. They have multiple career objectives. They're headed in a million different directions. And tracking meaningful data is very challenging. For the residential MBAs, you only have really one data point that you need to worry about. And the focus for that is, did you get a job in one of these three categories or five categories or six categories, consulting, technology, investment banking, marketing, general management, and so forth? Did you get a job and how much did you get? Well, for the executive MBAs, for some individuals, those kind of statistics are very meaningful. But if I want to start a business, well, I have a whole different set of objectives for myself, and the dimensions around which you would measure success, measure outcomes would be very different. I might have quit my $150,000 a year job to go start my own business. Right now I'm making nothing, but hopefully within a year or two or three, I'll be back in a positive cash flow situation for myself. But we wouldn't want to focus on compensation data. Similarly, it's more than just compensation. It's also span of control. It's budgetary authority, things of that nature. If you own your own business, did you expand that? Or did you perhaps your objective is to sell it? Were you successful in that? I think what I'm trying to say is that the spread, the diversity of objectives and what are important indicators of success is so much more varied with the executive MBAs that it presents a real challenge. In addition to just having one point of data collection, as you have with the residential MBAs, you really need multiple. You need to track this over time, perhaps 3, 4, 5 years, to get some sort of meaningful trends or indicators of results and impact.
You're right. So this is probably just the beginning of a surveying exercise to sort of follow people through their career. I think it's true that we think about this program as both a short-term investment in students, students' careers. Obviously, we're going to talk about students who want to switch, climb, start their own business, but there's also a longer-term aspect. You're shaping, bending the arc trajectory of your career, and that's sort of where the follow-up comes in. Your point about the diversity is a good one. Obviously, I think about our full-time MBA students all have left the workforce to come to school. Makes it much easier to track employment outcomes when everyone has left their job. Obviously, an executive MBA program is a working professionals program, so everyone is employed while doing this program. And so, in terms of tracking career data, particularly given the diversity of aspiration, the fact that we do have switchers, climbers, entrepreneurs, to use the parlance of the program, and obviously people who are exploring multiple paths. Maybe a climber thinking about potentially switching, maybe a switcher also considering launching their own business. It's not quite so easy, as you know.
It is complex. And as I mentioned, and to your point, we are looking at multiple data points over time. So for the class of 19, we now have pre- and post-program data. What role were you in when you entered the program? What were your compensation? What were your primary career objectives, and so forth? We have data as they exit the program, and what we're hoping to do is, 2 or perhaps 3 years post graduation, come back to them once again and resurvey them to find out what the trends have been over say a 5-year period.
And what a great opportunity to tell the story of the program, right? So that's the thing that I think about. Certainly, we've had prospective students ask about this information for a number of years, and you've been very generous with your time. You and Sarita, and talked with a lot of prospective students about the resources and support. And Sarita and I were on a webinar earlier this week, and I was telling her that the stuff that students really seem to enjoy are the stories, right? The anecdotes. I worked with a student from a similar background. Here was their path. This is somebody that I've helped get to this job or help climb, et cetera. But there's nothing quite like data to also help paint a picture. And so I think it's a little bit of both, right? It's the qualitative and the quantitative.
Oh, very much so.
And so I'm excited from an admission standpoint to have this information, and also to be able to tell what's a very positive story for the program about students coming in, having goals, and achieving those goals. Which when we think about the impact of the Darden MBA, we think about a lot of things. We think about what's happening in the classroom, what's happening outside the classroom. But the sort of one undeniable thing is everyone has a career goal that they hope to achieve.
They do. They're not coming to get their MBA for just pure enrichment. Mm-hmm. They're looking for some sort of impact or transformational experience, if you will, on their career and the trajectory that it's taken.
Absolutely. So just as context as we get started here, we talked a little bit about what led the CDC, the Career Development Center, to sort of collect this information, some of the challenges of collecting it. So let's now dive into the data and sort of get into the meat of this. But before we do that, I want to make sure everybody's on the same page and understanding what we mean by switcher, climber, entrepreneur. I know these are terms that we use quite a bit. And if you come here as a student, you will hear this a lot. And the program team obviously is going to work with you individually and understand your story. But from a bucketing standpoint, just to help students sort of orient to the career search process and resources, we do use this nomenclature. So let's sort of work through them systematically. How does the career team define switcher?
Well, we think of switchers as individuals who are looking to make some sort of pivot, if you will, in their career, leaving their current company and looking for perhaps a new function and or a new industry and or certainly a new company, and it may be a new geographic location. The more of those moving parts you put in place, the more challenging the transition, of course. But they're looking to make some sort of fundamental change. We would define climbers as those individuals who are looking ultimately to ascend within their organization. And in near term, perhaps it comes in the form of promotion, but it could be a new assignment or a lateral move that takes in the direction of the actual trajectory they want to assume, the functional roles that they want to play in their organization, and perhaps something that's more fulfilling. Entrepreneurs we typically define as those individuals who are here to launch their own business or expand a very early stage business that they have that's currently up and going.
So, Jim, one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about talking about all of this career content here on the podcast is we have many phone calls and interactions with prospective students where they're asking about, look, I think I might want to make a career transition. Can I do that in this program? Or they're asking, are there career resources for executive format students here at Darden? I think some of this is coming from other conversations they are having with other schools, where those schools are saying, well, we really have students with a particular kind of aspiration in our program, or we don't have dedicated resources for executive MBA students. The story here at Darden is much different than that. As you noted at the outset of the conversation, we have students with a diverse array of career interests. We have climbers, switchers, entrepreneurs, in all of our classes. In addition, we have a number of dedicated resources. We have dedicated career advisors, coaches that work with our executive format students. You do a ton of programming. We talked about all of this stuff here on the podcast, but I always feel like we've got to keep saying it because it is such an important part of the decision. So let's talk a little bit more about sort of the arc of student career interest here. We know that oftentimes students will enter saying, this is what I want to do, I think, right now as I'm starting the program, and that interest will evolve over the course of their time at Darden. So for the class of 2019, did the numbers bear that out?
Oh, very much so. Coming in, we had about 45% of the class was interested in climbing within their organization. Another 45% of the class was interested in switching as their stated primary objective for getting their MBA. And then approximately 10% of the class was interested in either launching or expanding an early stage business. As the program unfolded and their tenure here, wore on. At the end of the program, what we found was that the number of people interested in switching actually increased from 45 to 55%. The number of people interested in climbing dropped from about 45 to 26%, and the entrepreneurs increased from about 10% to 19%. So very dynamic class, people pursuing their interests and heading in all sorts of directions. And to your point, to be effective, we have to be able to actively support the career objectives of every individual, regardless of what they are.
So what do you attribute the change to? I realize there's this sort of multivariable, right? But on the admissions side of things, we're asking students to do this reflection prior to matriculation. We have a question on our application around sort of short-term, long-term career goals. What do you want to do? Why are you pursuing an MBA? What's your ultimate goal here? And so students have thought about this a lot, and they show up having thought about it a lot, and yet, it evolves. Do you think it's about what's happening in the classroom? Do you think it's about their classmates? Is it about life? Just the fact that people are in this program for 21 months, that's a long time. Things can change. What do you and Sarita hear from students as sort of the motivation?
Well, I think it's all that and more. The MBA is a transformational experience, and there's just no getting around that. You come in, you're exposed to a broad spectrum of academic courses that really are intended to expand your awareness about business, not just business concept, but business directions. You are working with your class on dozens and dozens and dozens of cases that introduce you to all sorts of different industries and business challenges and so forth. And I think that really stimulates people's thinking about different directions in which they might head. But in addition, you're going to be connected with 135 people in your class who are coming from all sorts of different walks of life. From business and industry, nonprofits, government, the military, the list goes on and on. And those have a powerful influence of opening one's aperture, if you will, and letting them see the world and career paths through other people's eyes, having conversations about, well, so I'm in retail. What's it like to be in investment banking, and what have you? So all of those things, I think, come together to really have a very powerful influence on all the students' sense of what their objectives are and the direction in which they want to head. I really like the analogy of opening one's aperture. It gives you a much broader view of the world at large and the possible directions in which you could head.
Yeah, we've been doing some student interviews, getting ready for a video series that we're working on. And I have been struck by a pretty common refrain from the students we've interviewed about the impact of the program. You hear a lot about confidence. You hear a lot about students' own belief in themselves, their ability to just figure something out, right? They're put in positions all the time in class where they're asked to have an opinion about something they don't know that much about, they have limited exposure to, and they just probably learned about it during the case reading and prep, maybe a couple nights before or the night before. And yet they're asked to contribute and participate and show up. And I think through the sort of crucible of that experience, students come out the other side and feel like, maybe I felt like there was a lot I couldn't do before. Now, I don't feel that way.
Yeah.
I feel like I can almost do anything. And I wonder if that's what's going on here, too.
Well, it is a confidence builder. I can tell you when students enter the program, most are pretty intimidated. Jim Dieter will talk about the
imposter syndrome is a pretty common
the imposter
feeling.
syndrome. Thanks very much. And as am I really smart enough or competent enough to be here? And through their time here, it really is a confidence builder. They have their ideas tested. Their critical thinking tested. They're open to all sorts of new perspectives, new horizons, and they come out with a greater sense, not just of confidence in themselves, but confidence in their ability to move in directions of their choosing and to be, if you will, kind of the master and commander of their career, their own destiny, as opposed to being reliant on moving up the corporate ladder, for example.
That's a great point. The other common thing that came up with some of our students in the course of these conversations was this was about taking control of my career. So your point about being master and commander, an MBA and the training that you get here at Darden allows you to do that. And I was struck by that. And I was also struck by the fact that it resonated, not wasn't just one comment in one conversation. It had this resonance across multiple conversations. It was sort of interesting thing. I also think, to the point that we were talking about your own sense of self, sort of belief and how you view yourself. Your classmates play a role in this, right?
Oh, huge. In multiple ways. I mean, first of all, the members of your learning team become not just colleagues, but close confidants. I had and coaches and counselors for you, people that you can share your backstage with and really test initial ideas, get feedback on your strengths, your weakness, development needs, how to better fill your gaps, and that would enable you to head in the direction that you want. The larger body of students in your class are all very interested, willing, and eager to share information about their industries, their functions, their career paths, what they're trying to do and accomplish, the directions they're thinking about heading. In this past residency, for example, we had 20 students come together who want to explore careers in consulting, and they're forming a club. And in the process of doing that, not just helping students prepare for the consulting process that they want to transition to it, the case interviews, the behavioral interviews, and helping them research the industry more effectively, but perhaps even inviting consulting firms to send representatives to some of the residencies or do a virtual session on opportunities with this firm versus that firm. So the number of resources that the students provide each other and the assistance that they provide, I think is a very enabling factor in not just expanding one's aperture, as I said, but also helping one engage those opportunities and pursue them actively.
And let us not forget that students, in doing this program, take on quite a bit, right? You have what's going on in the program. Of course, personal life doesn't stop. People have babies and get married and move and all this kind of stuff, in addition to going to school here. And then we also have students who have very full work lives too. Yeah. And so we have students who change jobs during the program and all of this kind of stuff. So nothing slows down. You add a little bit more to your plate, or a lot more, as the case may be, and you accomplish something that's challenging. And I think through that experience, you feel like, wow, I just did this thing That's pretty incredible, and I feel like I can do a lot more now.
Well, sometimes I just don't know how they manage all that complexity in their lives, but it's a great training ground, if you will, for very senior leadership positions where if you think about the executive suite of any organizations, those people that occupy those seats have so much complexity in their lives. There are more things to pay attention to and more demands on their time than one knows what to deal with. And those individuals are exceptionally good at identifying their priorities, identifying what's strategic, and managing their energy so they can effectively address that complexity and guide their organizations in profitable and successful directions.
That's right. And I think you hear students talk a lot about prioritization, figuring out what's the most important thing right now. Everything can't be priority number one. They learn about letting go of things. They learn that they have to trust others, let others help them. Not always easy for a high-achieving group of people. These things are real stretch activities. A lot easier to talk about on a podcast than actually do in real life. But yeah, I think it's one of those learning experiences that's embedded in the program, perhaps a little bit unspoken, but then when you get into it, you realize there's a lot going on here that's about not just my professional development, but also personal development.
I couldn't agree with you more. Certainly you're exposed to all sorts of conceptual academic concepts that are essential for performing effectively in various functional areas, but it is the personal transformation that takes place during your time here at Darden that I think is, perhaps the most impactful, perhaps makes the largest difference in your career. Information is one thing, and it changes year to year. So, I'm sure accounting concepts pretty much stay the same over time, but implications for strategy and positioning and leadership and so forth, Those will vary with the times, but the personal transformation that takes place in terms of confidence in yourself, in terms of expanding your vision and enabling you to manage your time and your energy and your priorities more effectively, those are perhaps one of the biggest payoffs, I think, of a Darden education.
Yeah, I had this conversation on the Experience Darden podcast with Mike Lennox about the future. A lot of things on people's minds. Disruptive technology, AI. What's the future of work look like? How do you prepare an MBA candidate for that? And he made an incredibly insightful point about if you think about machines and what machines are really good at doing. Well, it's all the computational, technical stuff. When you think about what the machines can't do, it's all the people stuff. It's manage a team, work with others, collaborate, make a difficult decision weighing a lot of emotional quotient type variables. Those skills, you have an opportunity to really hone and craft those skills here. And so, I think all of this to say who you are as a person is changing. As a result, it's only fair to expect your professional interests to change. Things that you may have ruled out previously for yourself become possible. And career paths you may have not previously considered all of a sudden become considerable. And so, I think that is when we talk about, Darden, the educational experience and the sort of goal of it, as you noted, being transformational in nature. I think it's all of that. So let's dig into the data. We talked about the sort of switchers, climbers, entrepreneurs. I think given that they represent the largest group of students in our class, let's start with the switchers. So what were the key takeaways for switchers in our class of 2019?
Well, it's interesting that the people that come in to switch have different time horizons for doing so. Some have a sense of urgency. They want to do it during the course of the program. Some want to do it after the program is over. It really depends upon what their transition date. But for the class of 19, 48% of those, almost half, that said that they were looking at transition and do so during the program, were successful in actually switching while they were here at Darden. And of those that switched, there was about a 70% compensation increase. So we think that is pretty significant. They ended the program with an average base of about $153,000, $154,000. The range, of course, is tremendous, but that was the general average compensation for those that transitioned during the course of the program. And they went in a variety of different directions. I think about 27% of them moved into consulting. We had about 20% head off into banking, financial services. Another 10% moved into manufacturing, another 10% into technology, another 10% into healthcare and biotechnology, biopharma. And the rest were scattered across a variety of industries, including real estate, consumer goods, media, non-governmental organizations, things of that nature. So very, very exciting to see the diverse number of pathways in which they all headed and the success that they were able to achieve transitioning while here at Darden.
So how are students finding these jobs? We talked about informational networking. We also know that in the second year of the program, students do have access to on-grounds recruiting, off-grounds recruiting, some of these more organized methods of sort of identifying employment opportunities. How are students actually finding these roles that they're switching into?
Well, we tend to break these down into two major buckets. The first we'll call Darden sponsored opportunities. Now, you referenced on-grounds recruiting, but we also have a series of interview forums that are conducted around the country each year, which is another Darden sponsored recruiting opportunity. And then we have a job board, part of our Darden Career Link, our career management software, where hundreds and hundreds of companies looking for executive MBAs will post opportunities each year. I'm thinking we probably have roughly in the neighborhood of 600. We bring 600 different job opportunities to the executive MBAs through one of those vehicles. In my experience, about 25% of those executive MBAs that are looking to transition find an opportunity through one of those Darden-sponsored vehicles, either on-grounds, off-grounds, interview forums, and so forth. The other 75% are looking for perhaps more of a niche opportunity, or they're looking for a higher order job that is more senior level, perhaps looking for more experience, or they're looking in an industry that isn't typically represented by a typical business school. Folks looking for opportunities in the arts or in the nonprofit world or international development, NGOs, they are not going to find many opportunities of interest posted here. People that are looking for vice president jobs or senior director jobs, no one really recruits on grounds or posts in an MBA website for those kind of opportunities. So those folks are finding their next great thing through some sort of network-driven process, which we are working very actively with to help support. Folks coming to Darden with multiple networks already. If you may have your professional network within your own functional area or maybe your own industry. If you're coming from the military, you've got a very robust military network. You have your undergraduate network and perhaps other personal networks you've established over the years. But the Darden network is huge and very, very actively supportive of people's interest in exploring opportunities as well as their job search. So, about, as I said, 75% of those that do make a transition here are using those networks in some sort of substantive way to make that happen for themselves.
Well, we know from the recent conversation that you and Sarita had and I had on the podcast, networking plays an essential role in any job search, whether it's just informational networking or exploring a company, getting to know a hiring manager, developing contacts within the organization to help you potentially ultimately land a job. So essential for almost anybody contemplating a job change. So a necessary part of the job process. I'm going to ask a little bit of I guess a question that is oftentimes on prospective students' minds. Do companies actually post and say, we want to talk specifically to executive MBA students when they are posting roles through sort of these Darden sponsored channels? Do they affirmatively express interest in executive MBA candidates?
Oh, very much so. Like I said, there's 400 job opportunities we will bring you to the 600 job opportunities each year, give or take, that we bring to the Executive MBA classes that are posted for Executive MBAs. Now, some of them may be posted for residential MBAs as well, but the companies, when they submit the job posting, job advertisement, they check a box. Yeah, we're interested in inviting executive MBAs to apply for and throw their hat in the ring for these jobs. So we've seen significant growth in the 4.5 years that I've been here. The numbers have increased significantly. And part of that's just an educational effort on the part of Darden. The common perception that many companies held is the same as the perception that a number of students have that, the executive MBA is for climbers. And so they didn't historically think to recruit for that population. So it's been an ongoing educational effort on the part of many folks here, mostly our employer relations and recruiting team, to reach out to those organizations and brief them on who the executive MBAs are and how many of them are actually looking to make a switch within their careers and are on the job market. And in the act of doing so, a whole new horizon, I think, has opened up for those corporations saying, wow, we have a cadre of individuals who are bringing considerably more experience than what you're going to have from the residential MBAs. And, yeah, we'd like to take a look at them.
Yeah, and I also think I often find, prospective students have the same questions. Who's in the classroom from an experience profile standpoint? Our executive MBA class goes from 5 to 25 plus years of work experience. If you're a company sitting out there in the world, you may not necessarily know that. But my guess is chances are there's probably some people in that class that you'd like to talk to.
Yeah, well, very much so. And increasingly there are corporations out there who are looking to recruit transitioning military as just yet another dimension to this. That has a broad spectrum of military transition, veteran integration programs. The names will vary by company and by industry, but those are very actively involved as well. And what they're doing is they're recognizing the considerable leadership experience and functional experience that our active duty and vets may have, and want to somehow incorporate those within their organization.
Yeah, and a quick plug for a podcast you've done for transitioning military candidates. We've talked about that on the ExecMBA podcast. We also did student interviews around this topic. Obviously, we have folks who are in the process of transitioning out or who have already transitioned prior to starting the program. And so we sat down with Roger Wieland and Connor Lott, two folks who had transitioned prior to starting the program, about their experience, what they learned, what they wish they would have known. So recommend both those episodes if you happen to find yourself in that boat. But a credit to the CDC team, the employer relations team, for all the hard work they're doing, sort of building awareness about Darden students, executive format students included. So let's talk a little bit about climbers.
Yeah, sure.
So another bucket of students who want to move up within their existing organization. What do those numbers look like?
Oh, well, we have some good news to share there. So once again, for the class of 19, it was interesting to see, as I mentioned previously, that the number of folks who had climbing as their primary career objective did drop from, say 55% or 45% upon entering to maybe, the high 20s, maybe a drop of almost 20%. But for those that kept their eye on that ball, that were looking to climb with their organization, we saw a significant increase in compensation during their time here. Just within the 18, 20 months or so of the program, levels of compensation went up by as much as 45, 50%. So very encouraging about that. And that was even a compensation increase for those that did not get a promotion but may have transferred, laterally to another opportunity within their organization that offered greater fulfillment or positioned them for heading in a different direction within their organization along a path that was maybe more to their liking or more within their wheelhouse or their skill sets.
Yeah, the thing that I was struck about climbing, and we talked about this on the podcast as well. It's funny to me how this particular podcast is also sort of incorporating so much of what we've also talked about in other episodes. But the process of climbing is very similar to the process of switching. It's just one you're doing internal. The other you're doing obviously external, and so you're networking, you're meeting people, you're developing sort of relationships within the organization. You're focusing on sort of where you want to go and trying to leverage those relationships to help you get there. Do you see something about the Darden experience that helps students grow and climb in that way, and sort of accelerates that path for them?
Yeah, I think if they manage their time here at Darden well, it uniquely positions them for ascension within their organization on multiple dimensions. First of all, just the fact that they're pursuing their Executive MBA increases their visibility within the organization. It's kind of a no-brainer, if you will. They have to get the organization's permission to support this, at least in terms of time off for their residencies and the global trips. But the program itself, I think, positions them on multiple dimensions for ascension within the organization. Certainly there's the academic content that covers the functional area, which is pretty fundamental, pretty integral to take on new roles, new functions. But it also gives them a broader exposure to elements of the business. So it lets them, if you will, step outside their own functional niche within the organization to experience it from a more strategic and more enterprise level perspective. In addition, the students, if they take advantage of the career services here, we're working with them to really refine their brand, their conception of self, and the direction in which they want to head, better define their gifts, their talents, and strengths, and think about how does that position me for advancement with this organization. We're working with them to increase their, what we call their internal board of directors. So who are the mentors, the advocates, and the advisors that they are going to have within the organization beyond their own immediate manager that may be able to guide them and position them for advancement or transition within their organization. They're having conversations with those individuals about, the strategic direction of the organization and where do my skills and my interests and my experience fit in that, emerging picture, and how do I then begin to position myself for those opportunities for advancement? What are the gaps or the development needs that I have that I need to address? And then they come back and use the Darden experience in part to begin addressing that. And finally, there's opportunities for independent studies, just as an example, where they might actually use those to make some sort of strategic contribution to a functional area that's a target for them if they like to move into. That happens frequently. And through all of that, they are positioning themselves for not just greater visibility within the organization, but position themselves with the skill sets and the relationships they're going to need if they want to step out and step up.
Yeah, and there's also leadership coaching elective, quite a popular elective where folks can focus on a particular challenge at work and work with a coach on that. I also think about just sort of Darden, as an MBA program, general management program focused on helping people think with the enterprise perspective, how all the pieces of a business fit together into the whole. Case method, you're put in the position of senior leaders having to sort of own, some difficult, challenging problems, ambiguous situations. Go into class, you're talking about these things. You have to communicate your ideas. So developing your executive presence in class and really practicing at being a senior leader while learning about accounting, finance, all this kind of stuff. It happens in the classroom. Obviously, there's things that happen outside of the classroom too that contribute to that development. But I think about all of that and sort of your ability to work with others and have a perspective, communicate, be comfortable with ambiguity, ask good questions. So this generalist orientation, you're well situated to take on more scope and responsibility as a result of that. That is really what general management is all about. It's sort of code for, and all the things you do here, case method, et cetera, it's code for leadership and leadership development.
Yes. You mentioned earlier in the podcast that what does artificial intelligence and the digital revolution do? And it's very good at crunching data, defining probabilities and things of that nature, but if I think about organizations and I think about organizations in the future by definition is uncertain, it's undefined, it's ambiguous. And perhaps one of the key skill sets that leaders, executives of the future need is the ability to not just embrace that ambiguity, but also reduce that, make sense of it, define strategic priorities in the context of that, operationalize those, and step those down for an organization to act in some way or shape or form that delivers on those objectives and moves the enterprise forward. And so those kind of skill sets are very hard to replicate with an artificial intelligence system, I would think. And that is what Darden is largely about in terms of training and developing the people that come here for the scenarios that those types of scenarios that they're going to encounter in the future for leading their organization.
Yeah, and speaking of leaders, let's talk about entrepreneurs. That brings us to the third category here. I will say I have a particular passion for this topic. We talked about it a bunch on the podcast. We've had folks from Batten on here. We've had entrepreneurs within the program. And, I feel really excited. Not to say I'm not excited for our climbers and switchers. Obviously, tremendously exciting to see someone achieve their career goal in this program, or at least their short-term goal through this program. The entrepreneurs are particularly exciting because the stories are invariably like this, something like this. I came to Darden either with an idea or developed an idea here, and I just decided to go and do it. And I put my energy behind this and to give it a try. And you see the sort of students, talk about the confidence they have, the resources that they have available to them, their classmates' support, all this kind of stuff. And I think those stories in many ways sort of embody the best of what this place is about. And so I think, you think about the training and education. Obviously, you're well suited to run your own business. You have to think like you own a business, like you own the business when you're in class. So it's a sort of natural segue.
Right. Well, the interesting thing about this, Brett, is that not only during my time here have I seen the numbers of people entering the program with a primary objective of launching a business or expanding an existing one, but those numbers have bumped up a little bit. And in addition to the numbers increasing for those that enter with that objective, the numbers are also increasing for those that shift to that objective. I was stunned to see the numbers of people who have stated that their primary objective was entrepreneurship, or to pursue an entrepreneurial path, double during the course of their time here in the program. We went from, I said, just under 10% to about 19% for the class of 2019. And there are so many resources here that support that. I think once again the shift, that increase is due in large part to that the Darden experience, to opening one's aperture once again to the possibilities that are out there. Folks are saying, I want to climb in my organization, or maybe I want to switch, but hey, maybe I want to step out and really start my own business here, because ultimately I want to be my own boss.
Yeah, which is understandable. I mean, if you've been working for someone else for a while, maybe doing that 10, 11 years or so, you start to think, hey, I got some ideas too. The other thing is you also come away from this program with a consultancy available to you. Certainly you have one available to you while you're in the program. You make great friends, friends for life while you're here. You pretty much feel like you can pick up the phone and call anyone and say, hey, you work in finance, you work in marketing, you work in ops. Operations, you work in X field. Can I talk to you about something that's on my mind with respect to my business? So you have that. For some people, in terms of starting their business while they're here, a lot of that is about the resources that are available, whether that's the iLab Summer Incubator Program, the eCup, the Entrepreneurship Cup competition, whether it's something like Venture Lab, the resources that are available through the Batten Institute, doing an independent study, working closely with a faculty member, developing a business plan, or further refining a business concept. It could also just be relational. The Darden Alumni Network. There are obviously a number of entrepreneurs in the Darden Alumni Network. Darden is very plugged in, particularly here in Charlottesville, but also elsewhere into entrepreneurial ecosystems. And as some of our full-time students have noted on the Experience Darden podcast, it's pretty easy to make those connections here. If you're looking to have conversations with entrepreneurs in the Darden network, as is true of alumni interactions generally here, a very warm response from the person on the other end. So I think a lot of it is about that. Of course, you read cases about entrepreneurs too, and there's a number of electives that focus on that traditionally in our program. So I think it's in the air. Is that fair to say? We have an entrepreneurship club, and we've got students who are walking around talking about it. MBA education. I think it's a natural sort of turn to say, maybe I should start my own thing.
Yeah, precisely. And, and we've witnessed good success with that. The path of starting your own business is not a quick thing. It's not as if you come up with the idea one morning and 2 months later you're up and running. There's a lot of phases you go through, from not just developing and expanding that concept, developing an initial proof of concept or minimally viable product, to all of the discovery phase where you are de-risking the business, essentially, identifying the funding sources and the distribution networks and the manufacturing and production resources you're going to need, the IT support, and finding perhaps pre-seed capital to nurture your idea along to the actual launch phase of the business, where you're out there putting things in motion, getting seed capital to get the business up and running, developing the distribution networks and an online presence, what have you. We have been, and it's been very rewarding to witness, observe, if you will, the success people have been making in those areas. So of the MBA-19s that wanted to launch their business, now many changed objectives mid-career, but we had almost half of them make significant progress towards launching that business during just their time here in the program. So that was an exciting, very exciting thing to be a part of.
Yeah. So how do you support those students? We've talked with Sarita on the podcast here about entrepreneurs. Somebody walks into your office or schedules a meeting with you and says, Jim, I really do think I want to start my business. What's the next step from there?
Oh, well, I think the first step is to develop the concept. There are tons of resources here at Darden. So what we will find ourselves doing in the very early stages is working with individuals to help refine that concept. But it's no different than someone that says, hey, I want to switch. Well, okay, so what do you want to become? Well, I'm not sure. So what are your gifts or talents? What's your initial concept or ideas? And working with them over time to articulate that personal brand. But with an entrepreneur, we're working with them to articulate a brand for their business or their product or their service. There are other resources here at Darden, of course, that help do that. You mentioned the E-Cup competitions. Well, the very first one is the concept competition, where that is what it's all about, developing that business concept. But it's also working with, from a career perspective, we're working with individuals to not just articulate the early stage of their business concept. Once they have done that, we want to refer them to the venturing community, which will help nurture that along even further and in a far more robust fashion. But we also want to have them think about developing the communication vehicles that they're going to need to not just build that business, but also take their product or service to market. So, things like your LinkedIn profile, your website, your personal story. Those are things that you're going to need to do to communicate effectively about who you are and what your concept or your direction is and the nature of your venture. So we work with people around that. We work with people around connecting with relevant folks in the Darden network and in the both internally within the school, but also within the alumni base. We invariably hook people up with other entrepreneurs that have launched their business, and those individuals in turn serve as mentors, advisors, sometimes even business partners.
So a lot is what I'm hearing. There's quite a bit available to students regardless of their career aspiration, entrepreneurs included. The thing that strikes me about what you and Sarita and the career advisors do here at Darden is that you're sometimes cheerleaders, you're sometimes accountability coaches, but most often you're facilitators. It seems like whether you work with people certainly on the tactical parts of the job, but many things are helping students brainstorm and thinking about next steps and making introductions. Or here are some alumni I think you may want to talk to, or here's some resources that I think might be helpful to you. Sort of that facilitation approach, which is interesting.
Yeah. I mean, a large part of what we do is just serve as sounding boards, and regardless of career objective. For an entrepreneur, it's like, hey, I'm thinking about building a business. I'm working on a couple of concepts. Sit down. Let's just talk about it. We'll just listen. We'll share what we think we're hearing. We'll help summarize that, and we'll then talk about next steps. Yeah. Similar process if you're looking to switch. I'm working in a management role in retail. I want to move to consulting. Well, let's talk about what that looks like and how that might happen, and who else can we refer you to or connect you with to bring that about, and how do we position you for the tactical things you're going to need to do if you make that transition. From resumes to interviewing and negotiating job offers. And for those that climb, it's a very similar story. It's like, well, let's think about who you are and the direction in which you want to head, and how do you build your networks and build your brand within your corporation and tie that to the direction that organization wants to head, and who are the individuals in your organization that you might connect with to help not just advance your career agenda, but also to serve as mentors and advisors. And so I tell you, it is such a fun job. I feel so blessed to be able to work with the students, and play a supportive role, if you will, in helping them engineer these significant transformations in their lives. I find it very gratifying.
Yeah, I can't imagine there's anything better than when somebody calls you and says, "Hey, that thing we've been talking about? Right. It worked out. I got the job, I got the promotion, I decided to launch my own business, I have a minimally viable concept now, I'm moving forward with this, just got some fun," whatever it is.
Oh, yeah. It's a great day to be a career advisor when those events happen.
Absolutely. Jim, obviously, this has been a very far-ranging conversation. We've gotten deep. We've talked a lot about data. We talked a lot about sort of the transformational nature of the program, the way that it's growing students both professionally and personally. Any final thoughts for our listeners? Obviously, we've gone a little bit longer than our traditional podcast here, but part of that is just recognizing that this is stuff that really people are very interested in. So, any final thoughts as we wrap up here?
Well, I guess I would offer this to the people that are student prospects or student candidates that are going to be coming here, is to begin thinking early on about your own personal brand, what your objectives are, the direction in which you want to head. And I would encourage them to begin exploring prior to matriculation. I've said this in other podcasts that, when you get here, you're going to be busy. You're going to have your lives. You may have your families. You're going to have the demands of this program, the demands of your job. You mentioned that earlier in the podcast as well. The more significant your transition, the longer the lead time you want to have to begin preparing for that whatever that transition might be. So prior to matriculation, you're certainly welcome to reach out to career advisors if you want to have some initial conversations about objectives and so forth, and maybe begin networking. But regardless, you use your own networks to begin your exploration, to begin seriously thinking about the objectives that you have and how you at least better define your initial brand, so that when you come into Darden and you matriculate, you already have the foundation in place to begin exploring actively and begin action planning, if you will, to make whatever that objective you have for yourself happen.
Well, Jim, thank you so much for your time today. As is always the case when we sit down, I learned something new.
Oh, well, delighted to do it, Brett. Thank you very much for inviting me. Always a pleasure to be here and share what I can with the incoming students.
And that was my conversation with career advisor Jim Collins, one of the career advisors who works closely with our executive format students. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at that's ExecMBA at Darden.Virginia.edu. Until next time, thanks for listening.